Well, basically this morning we talked about scientific data infrastructure, and I thought that he took my slide for spatial data infrastructure, which is basically a subset, I suppose, of scientific data infrastructure. However, when we had the talk this morning, I was very anxious to ask several questions about how you do the different services that you do here. And basically I'm going to present my vision for SDIs and how it underpins the role of government and the role of the provision of data and information. And I'm also going to concentrate on basically how you use the standards, and in this case the Open Geo-Spacial Consortium standards, that makes interoperability happen and make services stateless. So you can discover it, you can consume it, you can put it together. So basically, I'm going to talk about what a spatial data infrastructure, what does it mean, and I'm going to relate the duties of government to the Millennium Development Goals, and basically how those things map to an SDI. And then I'm going to talk about what are the benefits that we can garner from this investment in both a spatial data infrastructure and from adherence to standards. Obviously, there are always things that are missing, especially we are at the beginning of an understanding of what do we mean by infrastructure, and talk about potential responses and some ideas, and conclude eventually. So a question to you here, and basically, so what is the connecting thing between all these things? This is like a man-made disaster in the World Trade Center. This is emergency responders. This is a weather disaster, the Gulf Coast, and this is the famous New Orleans, the stadium where people congregated after the floods. And this is 3 days after the Haiti earthquake. So what are between man-made disasters and natural disasters? What is common between all these three occasions? Is basically every time they had to either remap or do the map from scratch. So basically they needed to create data to be able to start doing stuff. And if it was the data wasn't enough, they needed to go out and create data. But basically an SDI, we talked this earlier today about GIS, and we moved a little bit from GIS to SDIs, and we'll cover that in a minute. So the duties of government started when I was talking with Celia about, I was saying the first duty of government is economy, and she said to me, no, it's security. And I thought to myself, well, being a Palestinian, I don't think about security much. So the first, I live in the UK, so for me security, I'm secure. So the first thing I was thinking about was economy. And then I thought, well, basically security is also not just physical, but also environmental. So at one side we have the NDG goals, and basically duties to government. You could see you have to maintain information for good governance, and you would need to regulate and stimulate. And you could see how they nicely map to each other between the duties and the goals. And also in some cases they appear in more one of the duties of government. And this is why basically an advanced economy is basically saying these are the things that we need to achieve, because basically governments in undeveloped countries or basically have failed in their duties to their citizens. So as I said, an SDI underpins the duty of government. In the early days when we were talking about GIS, we had this basically early man, when they put their cave paintings up, they were basically establishing their first GIS. I think today we can say maybe it's an SDI. So And when we use the term infrastructure, we are talking about something that it should behave like an infrastructure. And it's basically, you can, like with roads, like with water, like with phones, you create it once and you use it on and on and on. And unless and you need to find your way through it very quickly, and you need to be able to, like if you say you want to have cost recovery, it shouldn't be a hindrance to actually using the information, using the data. In many places, you have map data created and it costs a lot of money to access the data, and it ceases to be an infrastructure and becomes a very high commodity and does not serve its purpose. So, and if you, when you establish your infrastructure, if you do it using standards, so basically you can always interuse it with other stuff, you can, it allows interoperability and further use. So if you're thinking about basically what are the basic things that I need to do for an SDI to serve the different aspects of duty of government. So you translate it for the national mapping agencies, what are the basic things that we all need to have, whether you are working for disaster management or at least establishing the baseline of what you need to do to provide information for good governance. And you start with basically like the geodetic framework, the topographic mapping. Although both those first two things, the American, especially topographic mapping, the Americans and the Japanese have done stellar work in creating digital elevation models for around the world. Their 30 meters and 90 meters availability is great news that people can start building from that. And they are underpinning all mapping in the world, those two data sources. Geographic names, there are geographic names in the US, but basically that is collected for the purposes of the US military, and you can do a correlation between how many new names each country is gaining within that service and military action by the United States government. So, and at the same time, that's not always accurate, and maybe you need people participation, local people participation too. So you need addresses, street names, landed property rights, and these basically are things that the government will immediately use local government for the purposes of taxation and and preserving property rights. Administrative boundaries and statistical boundaries are essential if we're going to provide time series that we were talking about this morning for the purposes of measuring what's the word for it? Progress. So, but an SDI, as we said, is not just about data. You have the whole framework of that allows you to have an infrastructure. So you collect the data for multiple uses. You describe that data to make it easy to discover. You make catalogs so that, like whether automatically or if you interrogate the data to find this data, you need to be able to look at it and visualize it. You need to be able to provide access to that data in an easy way. You need, and this is probably the first thing you need to do, is not the penultimate one, is the legal issues. You need to establish the economic policy, the legal standards that you're going to, we talked about the Creative Commons earlier and how we make data open, and this is where you start from. Education, training and capacity building, there are loads of SDIs that are happening in the world and in Europe. However, these are probably the last thing that people actually put money towards and put effort towards is the education and the capacity building. So this is just an overview of an SDI and some definitions of it in one sentence and so on. So basically it shows like the different tools and the different software that you can use for to create, to discover, to publish, and to use the components of this infrastructure. Europe is they understood the need of a spatial data infrastructure, and we have a legislative framework for European SDI, because they understand when people are sitting across borders and they need information about each other, there is loads of barriers in the way. So the European Commission put forward the Inspire, which basically establishes an SDI for Europe. The implementation plan is going to take us to 2020, and that went into UK law just last year. And basically we are working little by little to establish this SDI. Of these, for disaster management and recovery, we have these different other initiatives from the European Union, like the Global Monitoring for Environment and Security, the shared environmental information systems. But the one that every time responds when there are disasters, the Group on Earth Observation for System of Systems, where if you needed satellite data after a disaster, they have protocols that will allow you access to data that are not usually available. So if you enable your spatial data infrastructure in a country, these are the things that you can start benefiting from e-government that we were talking about, that access to health information and the provision of the data sets can all be built on top of this infrastructure. So if we very quickly look at a technical overview of an SDI, these are the different things. You have to have the content, you have to have the networking services and the applications. And you can see even in Europe, I work for Landmap, I manage it, and basically as part of what we do, these are the things in orange that we're just about covering. There are still gaps on actually establishing an academic spatial data infrastructure, because in a spatial infrastructure, like all infrastructure, they need to connect to each other, and you need to be able to interoperate. And I mentioned the role of standards earlier, and we believe that the Open Geo-Spacial Consortium standards allow for this interoperation to happen, and these are the different. I'm not going to go into the definition of these standards, only to describe that these are there and they're available for use, and as soon as we all start using them, we can start interoperating very easily. If you look at I've mapped it a bit earlier, where we have the technical, where we have capabilities and how we provide it via OGC services. So in this case, I'm only like providing the academic response in these areas in the UK. Obviously, Landmap and EDINA are probably the people who are making up these. So interoperability, we heard about it earlier today, and everybody is emphasizing it, and we believe that OGC standards allow for that. And basically, the important message of interoperability is that the services that you're creating and the access to those services need to be stateless. You don't, to be able, for other people to be able to use them, they do not need to know much about you. Other than when they need to use you, they can start asking questions and basically in very quick, within a matter of minutes, if not they'll be able to start consuming your services and consuming your data. This is an example of how these standards are being used in this case for fire respondents, and basically you have you can start. In this case, they're using sensor standards, and for they call it sensor web, and for that you don't need to know where is every sensor. but because they are stateless, all you do is basically, you say, what sensors do I have in that area? And basically these sensors will start popping up as a search on Google, and then you can start consuming the information that they're providing, put them in your wizards, put them in your models, and then you can start making decisions and directing action by the fire responders. As I mentioned earlier, basically it establishes the parameters, the basis of what governments in developing countries need to do. You can start measuring performance, you can enhance the disaster response because you know where things were, where you can even model it at, like if people are running away from where people will, in the case of fire or in the case of flood, where is the best areas for them to congregate, to be moved, and so on. And lays the foundation for the sustainable, and for me it's like eliminate the duplication of effort. Every time you have a disaster, you need to do things again and again. So in OGC standards, if you do the infrastructure using OGC standards, you can start having all these very quickly services available for users, and as I said, they can start consuming them immediately. They don't have to plan for them. There are always missing bits, and I say there are two missing bits. One is on the human organizational side. The human organizational side, that we need a better articulation of what an SDI is, and for people to subscribe to the idea of basically that all countries have the base minimums that allows people to create their services. We talked a bit earlier about the failure of or no capacity of some government to produce this. But however, in the next presentation, you will be hearing about how volunteer and web access to data can allow us to start building these for developing countries, building these base maps. So on the technical side, these are like quite, part of the management of rights is basically authentication of web services. We can authenticate web pages, but we still do not, we are not capable of authenticating the interoperating bits, although my understanding that the chaps at Edinburgh University might have cracked that problem. And I'm waiting with the bated breath for their... you can do interoperability because we keep talking about it, but we don't do it. And basically, if you invest in that, you start, we talked about earlier in the morning about grid services and how you make things available for the scientific community to process data. And the idea, if you do it within a standard, you open it to wider than just the community and the scientific or the specialist community to the wider community. So how do we go about building the base maps? We're going to talk about it soon, how that could be done. But basically, crowdsourcing, and I was quite excited by the previous speaker about Microsoft being cooperative in this area for public administration. If Bing Maps announced recently that they might be able to offer their data for OpenStreetMaps to do the digitization, that will be a huge win for the community. OpenStreetMaps, we'll be talking about it in a minute after I finish, hopefully. I think what we need is to build a coalition for establishing the base maps for developing countries, because for most developed countries, it is there one way or another. Another thing that I would like to talk to you about is basically, we talked about earlier today about the open knowledge community, and we try to do that. These are some of the data that or knowledge resources that we provide for our users. And the one that we're working on and consuming all our annual budget is basically based on taking a European-sponsored capacity building workshop for e-carbon mapping, which I was pleased to see in the morning presentation talking about e-carbon accounting, and make that available for the world. But as I'm saying, we need these resources will be used for everybody, and it will be beneficial if we, instead of duplicating effort, that we work in a coordinated way, that we all, our meager resources are pulled together to create, or at least we work on this, you work on that, and take things forward. We talked about crowdsourcing the map, and also when I talked earlier about the enabling, providing the processes, if you build on standards, you can start enabling people to create their own applications outside the closed scientific communities where access to grid services are very tightly regulated. You tell them these are the services that are available, and they can start writing their own applications and publishing them to your services. So we have reviewed what an infrastructure is like and how we can use that for Meridian development goals. We think that initial investment will more than pay for itself in benefits, and we think more coordination is needed. I would like to finish by thanking all these people who have provided slides, ideas, and discussion, and and thank you for listening.